We are proposing that state aid to education increase by 5% in each of the next 2 fiscal years. We're also proposing that special education increase by 5% in each of the next 2 years. And let me explain why that's so important in the overall outlook for our public schools. As you know, the state aid formula kind of works resources and needs. And what we've seen over the last year is really kind of an extraordinary growth in property valuations in rural Nebraska and agriculture in particular, and urban areas have been flat. So that will mean more rural areas have greater resources, and therefore they're likely to receive less state aid, equalization aid. But everybody receives special education funding. And so we wanted to make sure that we provided the proper balance for our schools all across the state by doing both of those. Relative to education, the other thing I want to emphasize that we announced a week ago, I had worked with President J.B. Milliken of the University of Nebraska, Chancellor Stan Carpenter of the state college system, and if the legislature will adopt our proposed budget, they are prepared with their boards to implement a 2-year tuition freeze for Nebraska students going to UNL, UNK, UNO, the University of Nebraska Medical Center, Chadron State, Wayne State, and Peru State. This is very, very good news. I can tell you we've got an overwhelming response from students. Parents are excited. Wasn't that long ago that I had to pay for my son's education. I know how critical this one is. We are also proposing a similar, about a 4% increase in community college funding in hopes that they will take a serious look, our 6 community colleges, of adopting a similar 2-year tuition freeze. Now, there's 6 boards. They operate a little bit differently. They have different resources, but I'm hopeful that our community colleges can take a look at that too. That would be very, very important. As you know, we have a very, very old veterans home in this community. And we are committed to building a new Central Nebraska Veterans Home each time as we build a new one, as we did in the Omaha area a few years ago. We try to name them by the area of the state. It is critical that we go forward with this Veterans Home in Central Nebraska. So we are putting in a commitment of $47 million, up to $47 million. I don't think it'll take it all. To access $74 million from the federal government to build a new Central Nebraska Veterans Home. Now, this is critical. Federal government will not partner with you unless they are sure you are committed to building it. And we are committed to doing that. We want to keep that process moving forward in that regard. And most of you have been out there. We need private rooms. We need to show the proper respect for our veterans. So that's something that's very, very important to us. If you go out to the Tax Foundation, which is probably the most respected group as they rank the states, our business tax climate, for all the progress we've made, it's 31st out of 50. We're still in the lower half. If you go to the Small Business and Entrepreneurial Council ranking of the states on their top personal income tax rate, we're 35th out of 50. Now, the reason that one's so important, as most of the business leaders here in the state know, 90% of all small businesses pay their taxes through the personal income tax, not through the corporate tax. And so that rate is very, very important. I also pointed out today, 23 states exempt a portion of or all retired military pay. But in Nebraska, we don't do it. 43 states exempt a portion of or all Social Security income from taxation, but Nebraska does not. So I was trying to set the stage today for the discussion that we need to have about tax reform and a better business tax climate to grow this state. And I ask everybody, and I'd ask all of you, is every one of your family members still living in Nebraska? And most Nebraskans would tell you no. They've had a brother and sister, a son or a daughter, a grandchild, whatever it may be, who had to leave Nebraska because they couldn't find a job here or they couldn't find a good career. And the question is, are we willing to do something about it? Are we willing to reform the tax code to modernize it, to make it simpler, and to make it fairer. And I shared with the legislature, for example, today, if you look at our current tax code, we collect about $4 billion. $2.4 billion comes in through the income tax system, and the remainder from sales tax revenue. But most people don't realize we exempt $5 billion of sales tax exemptions. We exempt more than we collect. And so we need to take a serious look at our tax code and where we're headed. Because think about this. If you eliminated just half of those exemptions, we could eliminate the personal income tax and the corporate tax. And what would that mean? There would be no income tax on working Nebraskans. Social Security and military retirement income would no longer be taxed because we wouldn't have a personal income tax. There'd be no tax on small business income. And so the question is, and it's going to take some courage as I talked about today, are we willing to be bold and courageous, take a look at the exemptions that we've granted over the years, and eliminate some of those exemptions, a trade-off, in order to get to a system that wouldn't favor one industry over another, that would be modern. For example, it's been 5 decades since we've had a serious debate about our overall tax system. Life has changed drastically since the 1960s, and let me just share with you, we operated in a completely different economic environment then. The average cost of a home was $24,000. A first-class stamp was 5 cents. Gas was 33 cents a gallon. We didn't even have personal computers in our home. We now live in an electronic age. We are now educating our children for jobs that have not yet been created, using technologies that have not yet been invented. We are operating in a technology-driven global free market, and we need a modern tax code. Our proposal is revenue neutral and budget neutral. And let me explain what I'm saying about that. This is all about creating a better tax climate to grow the state. It's not about more or less revenue coming into the state. We want the same amount, but I'll make the argument as you create a better tax climate, we're going to get more in. Secondly, it's budget neutral. It's not about whether you spend more or less money. That's an entirely different debate. Now, there are a whole group of people who want to tax more services so they can collect more money to spend on their favorite government program. That's not what we're talking about. Now, I do want to emphasize, we've said one of the exemptions we need to keep is food. We're not going to tax food. Now, I feel very, very good about the discussion we've already had and as we're moving forward. Nebraskans, we have strong opinions. And as the governor of this state, I have a 1.8 million person board of directors, and you're not bashful about sharing those opinions. But the one thing we can do as Nebraskans is we can have those strong opinions. We can agree to disagree in an agreeable and respectful manner. And the objective here is to create a better business climate that will create more jobs and higher paying careers for the future of our state, our kids and our grandkids. Because again, I'll go back to all of you and ask you again, how many can sit here and tell me every family member that you have is still living in Nebraska? Most of us can't. You must be the exception. And if you think about the future, are we willing, first of all, we got to have the discussion, and I think we can. Secondly, then, are we willing to make the tough decisions? Now, I want to be clear. We've been having conversations with a lot of business leaders about would you be willing to do this? They want simplicity and fairness. They are tired of asking their lawyers and their accountants to go mine the tax code for another exemption to make a profit. They want to make a profit, create more jobs in the marketplace. And so, again, if you look at all these exemptions, there are good reasons why we put them in there. But are we willing to make the trade-off? Wouldn't we have a better tax climate if we weren't taxing workers, small businesses, could keep that income and reinvest it? Our retirees would no longer leave the state because they leave now because of Social Security income is taxed or their retirement income. So it is a challenging conversation, but I am confident we can have it in the state. And at the end of the day, you're probably going to go through like we did. At a very high level, you can figure out how to do this. Because all you got to do is eliminate about half the exemptions, and we can eliminate the individual income tax and the corporate tax. Then you get in the devil's in the detail, and you start looking at these, say, oh man, that's really a great exemption. I know we need to keep that. Well, if you keep every one, we're going to continue to have a mediocre tax system, and we're not going to grow the way we should. We're not going to have enough jobs for our sons and daughters. So that's the trade-off. That's the conversation we need to have. I believe we can have it here in Nebraska, and at the end of the day, I'm going to push very, very hard. Be bold, be courageous, do what's right for our sons and daughters, and create a better tax climate, and that means eliminating the individual income tax and the corporate tax.